So, how many of you took the bus to get here? Well, perhaps a better question would be, how many of you take a bus on a regular basis? I'm going to both, oh, thank you, I didn't expect hands. I'm going to both assume and, well, hope that it's most of you, if not all of you. But with this taking of buses, there's a lot of interaction with these spaces, bus stops. But have you ever considered the design of these stops you're waiting at? I've got 3 up here: Manchester, London and Sheffield. In Manchester, we have these yellow long benches split into single-seated segments by grey armrests. In London, TfL even refuses to call them benches, they're leaning posts. And in Sheffield, something went horribly wrong. They've got 2 metal poles. But the reason for this is to get you to think about what is the implication of these designs. Now, when I think of bus stops, I don't think of comfort. I think of getting just a place to wait while my bus comes. So it's not a very comfortable place to sit, so imagine trying to sleep there. And this is part of a wider design trend called hostile architecture. And hostile architecture is somewhat of a plague on the design of our modern cities. Hostile architecture, in the most brutal and honest sense of the word, can be likened to pigeon traps in our city. Now, I want to re-emphasize that. I've used pigeon traps, a deterrent for what is considered common pests and vermin, to describe how we treat people in our city. That is the awful nature of hostile architecture. Hostile architecture can be anything from floor spikes to slanted benches to cat tongues on the edge of ledges. But it all has one thing in problem. And it's easier to say, simply imagine if the city you lived in was designed to make your day-to-day life more uncomfortable. That's the aim. Now, personally, the decision to study architecture came from an interest in these social aspects. It came from where I've grown up in southeast London. The issue of homelessness is quite apparent, as it is sadly anywhere in the UK at the moment. But sadly for myself, I found that the more time I spent in the same environment in London, the more blind and desensitized I became to the local issue of homelessness. So when I came to Manchester, that knowledge, that acceptance and that vision of the issue became reinvigorated. And instead of let the same thing happen and decide to just keep going until I forgot about it, I thought I wanted to get involved. So what I did was I started, but when I started, I realized that as a student, my ability to take direct action is somewhat limited. You see, there's a misconception between the relationship between architecture and homelessness, that it's quite simple. Architects, we design homes, and homeless people, they need them. Build them. You know, that's what they think. But that's just wrong, really. There's so many problems that arise when you think about it like that. For one, think about it economically. Now, I'm going to say something really shocking here, but my student loan doesn't cover the costs of a housing project. So I can't build homes, neither can small UK firms. And developers and large UK firms don't have the profit-driven interest to invest in these problems. So economically, that's out the window. And next comes to the issue of, well, even if we did, it would be missing the point. At its core, homelessness is a socio-political issue, and it requires more than just material things to solve. Kieran Marjal is a principal at BDP. They're a really large UK firm. They built Piccadilly Station, so some of you may even go through it most days. And she said that both housing and support are required to solve the issue of homelessness. And that's a really simple and clean way of putting it. But we'd go even further and we'd say that the word homelessness is misleading because it suggests that the only issue there to solve is lack of a home. So I'm going to take you now, Last year, I and many others had the pleasure of meeting a man called Jamil. Now, Jamil is a local guy who works with squatters on their rights, and he's very involved within the community. And he said to us something that's become a core belief at WOAH. He said that perhaps homeless people really just need a place where they can feel part of something again. And that may take form in a place to shower, a place to meet up, a reference point for meeting other people. And so that became a really core belief in our design principle. And I'm now going to take you through 3 positive projects that follow this belief and so aren't necessarily structural and aren't necessarily homes, but have helped in some way. So the first I'm going to take you through is Parasite. Now, the name may seem poorly chosen, but it's really a nod to a style of architecture called parasitic, which is a style of architecture that feeds off of an existing structure. And so this John Carpenter-esque structure is designed by the artist Michael Rakowitz, and it's been going for more than 20 years now. And these projects are fantastic on both a technical and a personal level. So on a technical level, each of these tents costs about $5 to make. They're made from kind of Ziploc bags, just found materials. And you see that tube coming off? That is a tube that attaches to the waste air vents of buildings, specifically the heating units. So what happens is that all in one, the building is blown up and heated, which really helps in the climate that these are used in, which is Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and New York. So on a technical level, it works extremely well. But the genius of this comes from the personal level. Michael Rakowitz works individually with each homeless client that he builds these for. And so Rakowitz isn't so much the core designer in this as he is a translator. He takes these homeless clients' stories and experiences of the streets, and he translates them into physical objects. So they vary extremely much because depending on the person, some want them to be within kind of regulation so they can't get taken away, and some request that their tents have ribs with holes in the side to show the bare bones of living homeless. So from a personal perspective, it gives the homeless client a way to express their experiences and have a safer experience on the homes all in one. And it's just a shame that these can't be produced on a larger scale. But I could talk about these forever, so I'll move on to the next project, which is a Tower of Buckets. Now, this Tower of Buckets was originally an art installation in the Northern Quarter, and I have to admit, I have no clue what the original intent behind it was, but I do know what it became. So this was in the Northern Quarter during the days of its early gentrification, and what it was it was intended to be an art installation, but it became a point of commune for the local homeless community of the Northern Quarter. They began to corral around it, meet up around it. It was a point of reference, like Jamil said. They even guarded it from drunk people at night who would wish to knock it over, apparently rather ferociously as well. So this is probably architecture at its most core values. It's the creation of a place. It's important to remind you that architecture doesn't need 4 walls and a roof. It can be as simple as something like this. This Tower of Buckets created a forum in which the homeless community around the area could meet up, talk, make sure that everyone was okay, and gives each other support. It's really important to have places like these in which they can create their own kind of micro-community within the wider social aspect of Manchester. And so it's just a project that's more than the sum of its parts. The next project is a personal favourite. It's ours. And it's called Are You Aware? Now, Are You Aware is a project that was done only a month ago. we got approached by master students in the School of Architecture, and they said, we have an idea. So we were on board. And the idea was to map the city of Manchester. So we sent the troops out across Manchester, asking everyone in Northern Quarter, Piccadilly Gardens, and Oxford Road what initiatives they had in place to help the homeless, whether that be a pay-ahead scheme for coffee, whether that be giving out waste food at the end of the night, or even things like free dental care. And what we did was we took that information and we mapped it onto, this is only one half of the map. So there's this side and then a more normal looking map on the other side. But the aim of this was to create a dual use. So for one, it was intended to be given out to the homeless community of Manchester, so they had something physical to offer them help. So they could have the potential to, at all times, know where to go and where to accept help. And the other, possibly more hopefully widespread use of this was to educate the public. I didn't know that there were pay-ahead coffee schemes in Manchester. I didn't know that there was free dental care, and I now do. And so the aim was to give these places that offer initiatives support. Maybe you'd rather go buy a coffee at a place that has these initiatives in place rather than Starbucks. But it's also really important in terms of knowing where to help, because on these maps we've also included places where you can go to volunteer. In my position, when I came to Manchester last year, I was lost for help. I was lost in terms of how I could help. But the aim was to take the skills we have from architecture and create a simple and digestible map so that everyone knows where to go and how to help and what places are offering such help. And it's these three projects that really prove that there is potential in architecture for a positive relationship, but the relationship needs to be reevaluated because at the moment, it's wholly negative. Social media has made architecture seem elitist and somewhat kind of terrifying to those who don't fully understand it. The words such as parametric design are hard to understand, but if anything, these projects prove that architecture is simple at its core. You only really need a tower of buckets. And the truth is about architecture is that half of it is about buildings, but the other half is about people. And in the modern era, that's lost. So I implore you all to go out and ask yourselves the question, are you aware? Thank you.